Hello and welcome to the show that debates and deconstructs burning issues of the day. This is The Big Picture and I'm Athar Khan. The aviation sector seems to have run into turbulence. Indian airline companies, if market voices are to be believed, are on course to lose $3 billion for the fiscal year ending in March. The industry has been struggling with low fares, sky-high jet fuel prices and vicious competition. 5 out of 6 major carriers in India are losing money. The latest in a series of the aviation sector fiascos, to use a slightly harsh term, is Kingfisher Airlines. Promoted by Dr. Vijay Mallya, the airline that promised you the good times finds itself running into bad weather. The airline lost 4.4 billion rupees in the fiscal third quarter that ended in December. A consortium of banks own about a quarter of the cash-strapped carrier, which has so far been unable to attract fresh equity amid growing worries about its future. While Kingfisher has been under fire from aviation analysts who have dismissed its woes owing to bad management and a bad business model, the fact remains that the airline is not alone. India's 3 listed airlines, Jet Airways, Kingfisher and SpiceJet, have been posting losses for the past few quarters. Almost every airline is crumbling under the pressure of high operating costs, fierce undercutting of tickets by rivals and heavy debt loads. Tonight on The Big Picture, we try and understand what got us here. We'll also try and get a sense where the sector is headed and what steps can Indian majors take to stem the rot. Lastly, we'll ask our expert panel whether it's time for the government to step in. And to help us deconstruct the scenario, joining me in the studio is M.S. Balakrishnan, former Director Finance in Indian Airlines, R. Krishnan, Consulting Editor, Cruising Heights Magazine, and aviation expert, also Executive Director of Asia Pacific Academy, also with great experience in managing international airlines like Qatar Airways, Rajan Mehra. Also joining us on the program will be Sanat Kaul, Chairman, International Foundation for Aviation and Development, the India chapter. I'd like to start the show with Mr. Sanat Kaul, however, if I could. Mr. Kaul, Kingfisher is looking for partners for a bailout, but why should anyone put good money over bad money? Dr. Mallya has a serious problem. Would you agree?
Yes, I do agree. I think they have a wrong model and there's a need for a management change. But your first question, why should anybody put bad money, good money after bad money? The answer to that is that if they allow foreign airlines to enter, then foreign airlines may be interested because they get a fantastic domestic market. And if they have deep pockets, they would be interested in entering India as a market. And therefore, I think that may be the attractive part, not the airline itself.
Right. Rajan, bad business model, everyone agrees it's a bad business model. It caters to the upper class. He hasn't really taken care of his finances. Do you agree with what Mr. Kaul just said, that even despite all that, international operators might just be willing to come and join them as equity partners?
Yes, I do agree. Airlines from the Middle East, the Gulf carriers who have deep pockets, would be extremely interested to enter the Indian market. For them, the fact that the airline is badly managed, the airline is losing money, would not be as important as the fact that Kingfisher has a wide network across the country. And these airlines like Etihad, Qatar Airways, Emirates, most of their focus is entirely on India. 70% of their revenues come from India. When they launch operations, their business model is based on the Indian market. So for them, this would be a godsend opportunity, which they would grab with both hands.
Right. R. Krishnan, first of all, do you agree with that? And my question to you would be, is Kingfisher and Dr. Mallya ignoring the real problem, getting their finances right, getting the model right?
You see, I'll tell you, as far as model is concerned, if you look at Jet Airways, which was quite a successful airline, he's in deep trouble now. Is his model wrong? It's a full service carrier and a low cost carrier. Look at SpiceJet. It started out well, they have some problems now. It's an LCC and their net worth is also getting eroded. Is it a bad model? Look at Air India. Is it the worst model? So
But
you may
say that because he caters to just the upper class and he's shut down the LCC model.
The point he did deliberately, consciously. After all, Jet Airways also did that deliberately and consciously. In fact, if you look at Air India, the domestic part of it, they don't have an LCC at all. And even the LCC they have on the international sector, Air India Express, is actually bombing. There's nothing at all in that. They have huge losses. So it's very easy to say model is wrong. There are a number of issues in these things. If you look at one successful airline, then it's not been named Indigo, they made a lot of money in their sale lease back when the market was doing very well. We will know it only now. As you expand further, then you know what the problems are when actually competition begins to bite.
Right.
So at that time we will know. Maybe so far so good for Indigo, but it's not going to be easy. In fact, there was a meeting with FIA had with the Minister of Civil Aviation before Ajit Singh came in, when Vaila Ravi was the minister. Indigo representative was also one of them who said, we are making losses on a daily basis. I'm very aware of it. I knew what the FIA meeting today. So even a good airline like Indigo is in trouble. So there are a number of issues which is beyond the control of airline,
Right.
which you must admit.
Right. Interesting issue. We'll come back to you, Rajan, as well. Let me get in Mr. Balakrishnan first. Mr. Balakrishnan, you have some experience as in the finance department of an airline. First of all, you've heard all the panelists. Do you agree with them or do you have a different take on it?
No, I do agree with all of them that the way the airline industry has shaped up in the last couple of years has been very unfortunate, and to pass on the entire blame to high fuel costs and other expenses is not entirely valid. The fact is that with a strong desire to enter into competition and bringing down the fares to get a greater chunk of the public to travel by air, the yields have been extremely low. And even today, unless the prices go up to match the costs, I do not think the airlines are going to survive.
Right. Right. Rajan, you want to make a point? Also, after you make the point, could you answer a brief question? Dr. Malia says there is no question of shutting down, I beg your pardon. He's suffering 4.4 billion losses. Is he being too rigid? After your point.
Okay, what I wanted to say was that in the case of Kingfisher, more than a bad business model, it's been a confused business model. If you recollect, Kingfisher started off as an all-economy carrier, but full service. They graduated onto a premium carrier with business class and economy class, with extra frills, which cost them a lot of money. Midway through, Dr. Malia decided that he wanted to buy Air Deccan, tentatively to get the 5-year policy so that he could go abroad. Then he reverts back to the old model. So, you know, when you're basing your airline on different models at different periods of time, you're never going to have a vision. You're never going to really be able to make a proper marketing plan that would cater, like Indigo has done over the years.
Right.
They have one set business model. Their mission has been to have punctual flights, to give clean service.
And they have been successful to a large extent.
And they've been successful to a large extent. Whether they're making money or not, like Mr. Krishnan said, that's debatable. But they're doing all right, and the business model has been successful. So in the case of Kingfisher, that has been the case as far as their business model has been concerned. But added to that has been the business environment in aviation in India. Your ATF prices are as much as 70% higher than anywhere else in the world.
Right, right. We will talk about ATF prices as well, but I want to go quickly across to Mr. Kaul. Give us a sense, our viewers a sense, Mr. Kaul, that like my numbers say that globally, 70% occupancy would mean an airline is doing well, they're getting profits. In India, we have 88% occupancy and we're still not turning profits, if I'm not wrong. Give us and our viewers a sense of why that is exactly.
Yeah, I think there are two things involved. One is that there is the government and the other is the competition. Now, as far as the government is concerned, there are taxes which are very high. There are high taxes in other countries, but here at times the taxes are ridiculously high, like 30% sales tax, and the cost of ATF being so high, and so many other things. So government has to sit down and decide if they want this industry to do well or to be financially viable, to go ahead and do something. Now the second side is competition. After liberalization, there has been an extreme competition, and this competition has led to lowering of ticket prices. And after ticket prices are lowered, they run below operating costs. Therefore, so once you start running at below operating costs and there is no control over ticket prices, then you land up in a financial mess. And that's what's happening. So on one end is the government regime of taxes and things like that, and on the other end is the undue extreme cutthroat competition which is going on.
Right, right.
So
Mr.
between
Kaul,
these
Mr.
two,
Kaul,
the industry
Mr. Kaul, let me just interrupt you for that 1 second. We'll have to take a short break right now. We'll come back in absolutely no time. We'll discuss the unholy cloud, if I could call it that, of ATF, rising ATF prices in the aviation sector. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still with the big picture. Mr. Balakrishnan, coming straight to you. Do you think there are too many carriers, too many operators operating in the Indian market right now? Also, like I mentioned, this unholy cloud of ATF and rising ATF, it's been on the upswing for the past 5 revisions. Airlines are obviously not enjoying that. But do you think there is any scope and indeed a need for consolidation in the market? Do you see that happening?
I would tend to think that the number of airlines in the field would go down, with Kingfisher facing trouble, SpiceJet not too happy situation. As Mr. Krishnan so correctly put it, even Indigo, over a longer period of time, one is not too sure whether they would stay on. We have already had the market lost people. Air Deccan has fallen by the wayside. Sahara has fallen by the wayside. Paramount has closed down. And this is a repeat. Actually, if I may take a minute extra, this is a second phase of open skies. We had open skies in the early 90s.
90s as well, yes.
When a number of operators came in, small-time industrialists like the Khemkas started the NEPC, the Damania started Damania Airways, and there were a couple of others. They all fell.
Modi Luft and
Modi Luft. They all fell by the wayside. In 2003, when Captain Gopinath started Air Deccan, it was talked of as a revolution. But again, faulty management practices, blind application of a low-fare regime without taking the costs into account. All these have brought us. We should have learned from the American experience when deregulation was brought in 1978. A number of private airlines.
Coming to the question, Mr. Balakrishnan, do you see consolidation happening at all? Or is there a need for consolidation?
Consolidation is very much called for.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would say this is the time for big industrialists to come in and enter the fray.
Right. Mr. Krishnan, R. Krishnan, do you agree
When
with
you
that?
talk about consolidation, there's going to be no merger because you have had 2 mergers, one of Deccan into Kingfisher, then you had the Sahara into Jet. Both have been disastrous. So when you talk about consolidation, we are actually meaning death of a couple of airlines and the existing one growing. But this is a learning curve. You will go through it. If you look at telecom, it happened. How many players were there in 1994? How many are there today? So it is bound to happen. And telecom is also highly capital intensive, and where the tariffs are very low, internationally low. So you have a situation in India now that if you increase the fares, the passengers will vanish. If you reduce the fares, the airlines are vanishing. The truth is somewhere in between. So if it's a question of cost management, how do you compare the cost of a full service carrier with a low cost carrier? In fact, a low cost carrier like Spice, whose costs are supposed to be lower, even they are making losses.
A cumulative loss of 900 crores in the past 9 months.
So see, it is bound to happen. You're talking about these private airlines. Look at Air India. Look at Air India's losses. The total loss of Air India and the debts of Air India is more than the entire industry put together. So why do we hang 1 or 2 of these private carriers? What is wrong with the state-owned carriers? They had everything with them.
So you're saying the rod goes deep and the airlines are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do you agree with that?
I'm one of those who's very optimistic on the Indian aviation market as we go into the future. Just 1% of India's population travels by air. You increase that to 2%, you need another 500 planes. The economy is growing by an average of 7%. You have another couple of millions added to the your millionaire club. So it doesn't take rocket science to see that the future just has to be good for Indian aviation. Yes, there are always problems. Every country has gone through these problems. But as we move on, as the airlines learn, and as importantly, as the government changes its mindset and understands
Right.
that aviation is an important engine for growth, And all over the world, aviation has been the driver for economic
Right, but I have a question
gain.
there. I have a question there. Let me just come to R. Krishnan. You wanted to say something briefly, if you could, then I go to Mr. Kaul.
Yeah, I was only trying to say that the fares will have to recover the cost. It is not happening.
Right.
Unless that happens, there will be no respite from whatever you are seeing now. It's a major issue.
We agree with that.
Yeah, you agree with that. Mr. Kaul, Rajan Mehra seems to think the future of Indian aviation is bright, but let me give you a figure here. 30% of seats are going empty on an average. Indian industry is going by 15 to 20% maximum annually, while globally the percentage is much higher. Why are Indian airlines so optimistic about, say, global foreign investors coming in? What have they got to be so optimistic about?
Well, I think the general answer is, as already said, that with 7% growth in our GDP, there is potentially a lot of new passengers entering the aviation traffic, and therefore there is hope. The second thing is that airline has to be healthy, and airline industry has to be healthy, and therefore if there is surplus seat capacity just now because they have inducted too many aircrafts, there has to be some control. It's like a game of football, you have to have a proper referee.
Right.
Now, under the Aircraft Act, predatory pricing and excessive pricing both are mentioned as something which DGCA could control, and I think there is perhaps a need for it now to make sure that even if there's surplus capacity, the cost of operation is not going below operating costs, which is ruining the airline industry as such.
Right, right. Mr. Kaul, but coming back to the question...
also it doesn't become very excessive.
Mr. Kaul, coming back to the question of consolidation in the market, let me put you on the spot and ask you this. Do you see any more carriers folding shop in the near future? Do you see that happening at all? And if yes, would you want to mention some names as well?
No, wouldn't like to mention names. These people folding shops or new entries, there's hardly been any new entry for some time, would take place. In fact, I think what is likely to happen in future is that an airline has to go in for regional coverage, and some airlines have already announced smaller aircrafts, turbojets, and that is where the growth is going to take place, because smaller towns with smaller airstrips are going to dominate, where a lot of people have money to travel by air, and they need air connectivity.
Right, right.
So in future, I think there is growth going to take place, maybe not in connecting metros, which are already saturated, or at least they have a very high frequency of traffic, but smaller towns, second and third and even fourth tier towns, which will require smaller aircrafts, and that is going to happen, and that has started happening. There are some low-cost carriers who ordered a large number of smaller aircrafts, and they are going to start connecting smaller towns.
Right, right.
In addition, if there is a government policy of infrastructure to help connecting even smaller towns, that will be of a great advantage.
Right, right. Mr. Balakrishnan, let me come to it quickly. The question of FDI in aviation, 49%, in principle, the GOM has approved, the Ministry of Aviation has approved. The cabinet nod hasn't come yet. The Home Ministry has issues with security. How important is it for the sector to bring that foreign capital in to save the ailing sector?
In the current context, I think that would be a big, it will be like a savior to the industry. But merely bringing in FDI is not going to solve the problem. As we discussed earlier, if we are achieving over 80% seat factor in the industry and yet making losses,
right,
there is something that calls for introspection more rather than merely blind reliance on FDI.
So you're
FDI will only will bring in cash infusion at the moment.
Right. I want to talk about a little more about FDI, but that'll be after the break. I'll come to you after the break on the question of FDI. Don't go anywhere. Lots more coming up on the big picture after this break. Welcome back. You're still with the big picture. On the question of FDI, let me go across to R. Krishnan and ask you this. How important, like we first discussed, is getting in foreign capital to save the ailing sector. Also, you had something to say about the Home Ministry's concern.
You see, as far as FDI is concerned, there has to be an enabling provision in our policy. It's not that you have an FDI and tomorrow they will come. You have got nearly 100% in power sector, power generation. Nobody has come. So it's not that if you have an FDI provision, everybody will come. They will come only at the right time when it is,
When the climate is right.
So it is true. So you need an enabling provision to ensure that the policies are stable in India, number one. As far as security issues are concerned, if you think the things which have happened in the recent past, which have threatened the internal security of the nation because of foreign elements, they've invariably used telephone instruments and not aircrafts. And in telecom sector, you've got 74% foreign equity. Is this not a security threat? Why are you treating civil aviation specifically as a security threat? It is absolutely meaningless. In fact, they should not have this. They can have security checks, fine. But you mean to say they will have to use an airline to do any of those things?
Right.
I think
Fair
it is
point.
meaningless.
Fair point.
Absolutely meaningless.
Rajan, thoughts on FDI?
No, I think it was something that is required, and in the current scenario with most of the airlines starving for cash, I think it couldn't be a better moment for it to happen. So I hope it happens soon, because airlines like Kingfisher, a lot of other airlines would need cash, would need expertise, more importantly, would need foreign management to assist them. So it's a package really. The airlines that come in and invest into Indian carriers will not just bring in money, they'll also bring in expertise, they'll also bring in management policies that have made them successful around the world. So that's also something that's required. Kingfisher, to a large extent, has been their failure has been the result of their own mismanagement and inability to control costs.
Right.
They have not been able to make a mean and lean ship. They've
Right.
extravagantly bought planes. So all that has added to the
Its woes,
situation,
obviously.
which it is now.
Yeah, right. Very briefly, R. Krishnan, very briefly.
One point. You see, you look at Singapore Airlines, one of the top airlines in the world. You look at Air France, you look at all of this. Singapore Airlines profits are also shrinking. It is for this reason they have started a new low-cost foreign carrier by name Scoot. It will do medium haul and long haul. Now, why should they do it? Obviously, the costs are rising, and for them, the fuel prices is much less than what we pay in India.
Right.
So even where you have fuel prices lower, they are suffering. So there is a fundamental problem. Europe is going down.
Right.
US is going down. The global economy is like that.
Right.
So it is not something peculiar to India.
Right.
So where fuel prices are down, they are suffering. Where fuel prices are high, they are also suffering.
Right.
So you have to look at a holistic issue completely. You can't just look at it that way.
Right. Very briefly, Mr. Balakrishnan, if I could ask you this. The government has approved the proposal for airlines shipping airline fuel from abroad now. Will that help at all? And how, do you have any knowledge of airlines already using that option?
I'm not aware of the last point that you mentioned of the airlines already using it, but it's not a concept which is likely to work out very well. Fuel prices may be cheaper abroad, but for airlines to get that fuel, they would need storage capability here.
Not to mention added
transportation costs. And this is not only at one location. They would need it across the network.
There is an issue. There is an issue in this.
Right.
So I do not foresee this as a panacea to the problems. I know Vijay Mallya has been requesting for this from time to time, but I don't see this as a
Right. Let me go across to Mr. Kaul. Mr. Kaul, briefly, if you could, we are running short of time here. The government has said, Ajit Singh, the aviation minister, said there is no question of a bailout for Kingfisher or any other airline. But state taxes on ATF need to come down. There is a general feeling among experts as well as otherwise that state taxes on ATF need to come down to maybe 8% or even more. Do you think, how important do you think government intervention is at this point? And I'm not talking about a bailout.
Of course, the ATF prices have to come down, and therefore the tax on ATF has to come down. That's very crucial. As far as Kingfisher is concerned, the banks have converted their loan into equity, and therefore a minor bailout has already been given to them. The banks now own 23% of Kingfisher, and the conversion has taken place at a very high rate. So they have actually taken a substantial hit in their loan.
Right.
But ATF and taxes are extremely important for airline health, and therefore there has to be a consensus among
Right.
states,
Right.
or the ATF should be made into a declared good. under which it comes as maximum tax can be 4%.
Right, right.
These things have been discussed over and over, but nothing has come out of it.
Right, right. Very briefly, if you could, government intervention needed right now?
No, I think the government is already intervening. The good news is that they seem to be understanding the importance of aviation as an engine, growth engine. The fact that they're permitting ATF to be imported, of course, the airlines may not save the 20% that they would save by way of taxes, but even if they transport, the savings could be around 10%,
Right.
which in the current scenario is not bad. And more importantly, what this new policy could do is it could push the states to reduce the ATF taxes.
Right, right.
Because now, if the airlines start importing directly, they lose that revenue anyway.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
that could be an important
Absolutely.
aftermath.
I have to give the last word on the show to Mr. R. Krishnan. Very briefly, if you could.
See,
20
I'll
seconds
tell you
or
one
less,
thing.
government
Right now, you have got sales tax on ATF. The states are imposing. There is a serious fear if they are able to import ATF and dispense it through whichever way they want to do it, the state governments are likely to impose entry tax. So if you escape from one tax into serious tax.
Right, right.
This is something the state governments must understand. If they want connectivity, if they want generation, they have to keep
Fair
this
point.
away.
Fair point. We must end on that note. I must thank all my guests. Mr. Sanakal, thank you for joining us. Rajan Mehra, R. Krishnan, and MS Balakrishnan. Of course, what we got here today was that even though Kingfisher and other airlines are suffering from a crunch in the aviation sector right now, all is not lost. There is some hope for the aviation sector. The government must intervene. State taxes on ATF need to go down in the event of a non-bailout by the government right now. Thank you so much for joining us on The Big Picture tonight. Till next time, till we get you another edition of the same program. Goodbye, good night, and thanks for watching.